Welcome to the Freight Project Podcast, brought to you by Ceresys, a North American third-party logistics company providing shippers transportation management, technology, and solutions.
On today's The Freight Project Podcast, I welcome Kyle Humphries, founder of Friendly City Consulting, which focuses on collaboration in freight and efficiency in trucking. Kyle is also a lifetime participant in the world of freight, coming from a long line of workers in the trucking industry, even being a long-haul driver himself. Kyle and I will have a great discussion about the state of collaboration in freight. Kyle will express his mission of making sure that in the fast-moving pace of today's freight environment, that we all collectively remember the critical role that truck drivers play in the movement of freight and why establishing long-term partnerships with drivers and increasing overall collaboration in freight will help move the industry forward in a sustainable manner, despite the massive disruption in the freight industry going on thanks to market forces and technology. We hope you enjoy this episode of the Freight Project Podcast. Well, hello, Kyle, and thanks for joining us here today on the Freight Project Podcast. And thanks for all the listeners who are tuning in for another great episode. I bring you today Kyle Humphries, and with every first-time guest, we want to make sure that our listeners know who you are and what's your background in the freight and logistics industry.
Hi, Adam. Thanks for having me on. A little bit about my background. I grew up around the trucking industry since I was pretty much old enough to hold a broom in my dad's shop, and kind of plugged away through all different aspects of the trucking industry, and just kind of fell in love with the industry. As I've gone along, I even drove long haul for a couple of years and did a little bit of short haul. And then I moved into logistics and kind of fell in love with trying to make things a little more efficient and just trying to improve drivers' lives a little bit better. And really found a passion for that.
Well, that's cool. So, unlike I think some maybe 3PLs or even those maybe selling freight, they may never have been a truck driver, right? They kind of maybe were a shipper. They focus on shippers' problems. And so it's really great to have you today to sort of advocate and give the perspective of how, if we're, catering to truck drivers and remembering that ultimately they're the ones hauling our stuff and how important they are to the process, then all of us will definitely be of benefit for that. So thank you again for coming today. Now, that's your background, but what are you working on now, Kyle?
Right now, I am started a consulting company that I'm just working with some shippers, carriers, 3PLs, and just trying to help them understand some of the technologies that are being developed. Understanding the importance of the TMS systems that are out there, which ones are the proper ones for the shipper, because obviously not one TMS system is going to work for everybody. So there's all different kinds of systems out there, and just kind of working with them, see a lot of these shippers, evaluate their logistics, and kind of go through some processes and some technology that could help them improve their everyday operations and just make things a little more efficient. A lot of people just underestimate the value of some of the technologies that are coming right now, and just trying to overall help people make things a little more efficient in their operation.
Okay, and you're out there in the Canadian market, and I think that Canada is growing in its own freight volumes. There's a lot more, back and forth between USA to Canada. There's intra-Canada, and then Canada back to US. And can you tell us a little bit about kind of what you've seen in the differences in the markets? You're working at a consultancy. You're talking about the importance of technology. You're right in the center of 3PLs, the carriers, and the shippers. Have you noticed any difference between what we see here in the U.S. as far as TMS and the use of that, or the general use of technology, and maybe what you're seeing in Canada?
Yeah, so when you are dealing with international shipments, it's definitely a whole different animal because of customs paperwork. The slightest incorrect piece of information on a document could hold up an entire trailer load. So trying to make sure that everybody is transparent, everybody is making sure all of the information is correct and stuff, because customs can be a very, very difficult thing to navigate through, and trying to plan accordingly, because, obviously a lot of people have just-in-time freight, and, people can't have huge inventory, so they need to keep things as lean as possible. So when you're dealing with customs and all that, technology is obviously going to help with that a lot. There's things that with customs, I think, and especially with the visibility that's coming, that will really help with the customs processes that take place every day. So when you're dealing with international shipments, it's a whole different animal than domestic shipments, and that goes for in Canada too. Here, like it's so much easier to take care of a domestic shipment than it is for an international shipment, and also too to try and plan drivers' hours of service, because custom delays are so volatile. Like it's up and down. You could be 3 hours at the border one day and 15 minutes the next. So trying to make sure that we're hitting the borders at the proper times and getting the drivers through there so that we can utilize their hours of service as best as possible.
Yeah, so that technology sort of brings some efficiency to the very process intense parts of shipping, especially when it involves any customs. And so, we would think that looking at TMS and technology in general to kind of root out some of those inefficiencies, to keep you strategic, to allow you to see at what step are we in each of these processes involved in getting the freight from point A to point B, and seeing all the players involved in all the documents. You'd think that there might be some more adoption of technology, but in the US, we've even seen TMS as a TMS provider ourselves here at Ceresis. The adoption rates still aren't necessarily over the majority, aren't over 50%, sometimes reported as low as 35 to 40%. Are you seeing that in your conversations, that people are resistant to adoption? And maybe what are the reasons why they're resistant to that adoption of TMS or technology?
Yeah, there definitely seems to be a lot of resistance and skepticism within the technologies that are coming into transportation. I think the big one right now is the visibility. You have the different companies that are building visibility software and all that. And I think that with the TMS systems and the visibility that's coming, I think that to embrace the technology is definitely going to be an advantage for people. And it's just getting people aware of the technology and not resisting it, and embracing the technology to improve your system, because technology is definitely obviously the way of the future. And it does help, and it's not about trying to replace. I think a lot of people think of it as it's replacing humans' jobs and all that, and that's not what this technology and stuff is about. It's about making things more efficient. We in the transportation industry have been well known for being a fairly inefficient industry, and using some TMS systems and all that, and trying to join as much freight as possible that's going in the same direction, and getting everybody to partner as best as possible to utilize the equipment that is on the road now, because nobody is standing around saying we need to do more with less. What's being said is we need to do more with what we have. We cannot just keep building more trucks, building more trucking companies, building more parking lots. We're at that tipping point now that we have no choice but to start to make things more efficient. So with the different TMS and stuff like that, and the freight matching programs that are out there, I think it's great. And I think that, it definitely, even from the driver side of things, is if we can start to make things more efficient, get drivers backhauls that are closer to their receiver, then they can try and get home more often. and get home earlier. And I think that needs to kind of be, if we're going, especially in the trucking industry, that we really have to take a hard look at the driver side of things. And I think now with having the shipper of choice and all that, we're really starting to address some of these issues, the detention time, and just the overall treatment of drivers, period. I think we're really starting to address that. And I think that's a majority of drivers. That's all they really ever were looking for, is just to be treated with some respect and understand that their time is just as important as your time. And I think that we're really making leaps and bounds in that now.
Yeah, and it sounds like, if we can really remember as an industry that it is the truck driver who actually is hauling our stuff, that their safety is at risk. They're putting themselves through long hours. It's a tough job. Obviously, they do it because they love it. And I think all they're asking for is that in that technology conversation and that efficiency conversation, that they're a part of the table. And I think with things like the ELD mandate, and I know Canada has put something similar in place with ELD and A boards. But, there's an opportunity to really capture some of that data from those logging devices, attach that to a TMS, have better visibility for all parties, including truckers, so that they know, where their loads are at, where they need to go, who to pick it up, where all that stuff is already, predetermined, and the experience for everyone is just so much more fruitful. So that way, when problems do arise, we have the wherewithal to deal with them more efficiently, and they're not as disruptive, and the great thing I think about technology, and maybe in your conversations you're hearing this, is that ultimately it leads to a place of stabilization, right? The freight economy is a leading indicator of the economy at large. And when we can stabilize the freight economy, sort of like what the supply chain folks over in the warehouse have done with inventory management, we can really stabilize the economy at large itself. And there was this really good article that came out in the Wall Street Journal about a month ago about how the reason that we've had maybe this 10 to 11 year bull run in the global economy, and especially in the US, is that because it used to be inventory would eventually create a recession because you'd have too much inventory and not enough demand. But that, and you mentioned it with just-in-time procedures, that with better inventory management, primarily led by better processes thanks to technology, we've been able to really extend those bull runs to a lot longer because inventory is a lot more nimble, it's a lot more efficient. And I think that will extend into the final leg of the supply chain, which is the delivery part, the transportation side. And so, are you hearing out there people kind of thinking about that future? Is that what they're really trying to get towards? Or are they still really struggling with just getting technology in place at their organization? And how can they overcome that if they are struggling?
Yeah, I think there is now people starting to embrace the technology. I think a lot of people are now understanding the value of partnerships and stuff. I mean, we all saw that Schneider National is closing up their first mile and final mile delivery. We saw a few trucking companies close their doors over the past year and stuff, and some major companies like Vulcan and New England Motor Freight and all that, and left customers stranded with no options and had to make drastic moves, and probably wasn't the most best decisions that they can make, but they were forced to do it. So I think that's where shippers are starting to understand now the importance of partnering with a carrier, not bullying them into the cheapest rate possible, because you need a trucking company to be successful so that they're able to stay in operation, so that you have a truck that shows up tomorrow to pick up your freight. Because if we just look at it as, trying to drive the rate to the lowest cent possible, that's not always the best thing for you in the long run. So I do believe that we're starting to see people now partnering more and understanding that it's not about the cheapest rate. It's about figuring out what each other's challenges are and working on that together to try and come up with a better solution that works for everybody. the game of, we've played tug of war for so many years that it's now time that we really, I think, need to, sit down and start to pull the rope in the same direction. We can get a lot further if we just take a few minutes to explain each other's challenges between shippers and carriers and work on those and try and iron out the wrinkles together. And that's where I think a lot of, with the TMS systems, helps with that. It gives you a real-time price to make that decision. You're not playing in the spot market near as much, and you're able to kind of make real-time decisions that help each other out.
Yeah, and I like that. I think that's what, ultimately all the experts, the pundits, the consultants, the publications, I think are getting it right now, and they're getting it real, where collaboration is ultimately the place where we want to be with technology. As you said, when we actually hear the challenges and we listen, and then we can put a plan in place together to meet our goals collectively, everyone benefits. And what TMS and technology can do is it really kind of takes away those arbitrary feelings or anecdotes of what might be happening and gives you the truth based on data. And with even more advanced technology, things like, machine learning and AI, and the ability to get to a place of predictive analysis or maybe even actionable insights that say, hey, if you took this action, this would be the impact. You can start doing even more planning where people are at the heart of running this, and the stuff that was getting you in this kind of firefighting, zero-sum game, more feelings over facts kind of place that you might be running your business from will go away. And I think what we'll start to see is it roots out the inefficiencies, and we might have some bankruptcies. We might have people that aren't, leveraging technology. And the reality is that it's a competitive marketplace. And if you aren't, you could be left behind. But at the end of the day, the technology adoption is going to be a great movement for everyone in this industry. And I know 7 years ago, and you might have seen this too, Kyle, when I joined this industry, I was really surprised at how undisrupted still by technology it had been, that it was still sort of stuck in some old ways. And the answer I got from folks coming from a high marketing technology background, which was fully disrupted and really technologically driven, was that, well, that's just the freight industry. And it's nice to see now, 7 years later, that, well, maybe that wasn't the freight industry. Maybe this is possible. And it seems to be turning the tide, that the ship is actually, moving in the direction of technology adoption and all the benefits that can happen. But it does at times seem a lot more pragmatic and real. And that feels good. It's not just going towards a shiny object. It's really thinking about what can this mean long term and for all the players in the supply chain. So are you seeing that maybe we're on the tip of massive freight technology adoption from your standpoint?
Yeah, I believe like 2019 and 2020 are going to be game-changing years, I think, in the transportation industry. I think the trucking industry, obviously, you're starting to see it, happening right now. Through the air and rail will start to come along a little more. And I think one of the major things that is going to be is the visibility. The visibility is, to me, is the most important thing, is understanding where the trucks, the perfect example I can think is we all had a Saturday night when we were with our friends waiting for, 2 or 3 taxis to show up to go out on the town. And one person had to stand at the front door and keep an eye out for when the taxis showed up. And he never really knew when they were going to come. Well, now with Uber, you can make a real-time decision. The car is 15 minutes away, 10 minutes away, 8 minutes, whatever it is, you can make a real-time decision on what you want to do until that vehicle gets there. But with no visibility, you're going in blind. And I think now that's a perfect thing with a shipper or a receiver is you don't want to have to keep going and looking out your dock door, wondering when the truck's going to go up, phoning a trucking company, trying to get an ETA of the truck. And a good majority of those times they're inaccurate ETAs, and people get very, very frustrated, which I don't blame them. Any one of us would get frustrated. If you phoned and ordered a taxi and then you called the company to say, like, where's my car? And they told you 5 minutes and it showed up in an hour, you would be very upset. And that's where I think shippers kind of got to that point. They were sick of being lied to and not getting that visibility of where the truck is. And to me, it's, even as a driver, like, drivers were very upset when the first satellite tracking came on the trucks. Drivers were very upset about, and they felt like it was Big Brother watching them over and all that. And, I had just kind of started driving at that point, and it never ever bothered me because, like, I never lied about where I was going to be. Is if you do what you say you're going to do and you're where you say you're going to be, then you have no reason not to let anybody see where you're at. And I think that is one of the things now. The major thing is that there is going to be a sense of accountability now for people. Like, you need to be able to do what you say you're going to do. And now, like, we can see your progress and we can make a real-time decision, which is so important now, because everything now, time is everything, like, time is the most valuable thing to everybody. So with that visibility that's coming, and once it becomes a standard, it will start to wean out the people that are lying, or it will force people to start to be honest. If you're 2 hours, and a lot of times I've found is most of the time shippers and receivers, they're okay with the truck being a couple hours late or something like that, but they just want to be told the honest truth so that they can make a decision based on true facts. So the visibility, I think, is going to be one of the most, if not the most important part of the technology embracing that we'll see.
Well, how about that? An industry that is made up of honest brokers, honest players, people really working hard for continuous improvement, using the data as a way to strip away some of that, emotion, because business may be business, but at times it may feel personal. And, I think once we give some more credit and the due back to the drivers and kind of say, hey, we understand how important you are. This technology's role is for us to work together from a shared place of data and for us to all be better. Shippers for a long time didn't trust freight brokers. What's the pricing look like? What are you marking up? Or, brokers maybe treated truckers like objects as a means to their margin, right? And I think that's going away. And it's better for the consumer marketplace too, right? If you're a Wayfair shopper, and you have a new final mile process that Wayfair's put in place, to get that furniture to the consumer's door, you want to make sure that Wayfair's doing everything they can to give you a good experience. And in fact, I think Wayfair's whole entire business model really depends on making sure they're transparent and honest. And that depends on having good third-party logistics partners and good freight technology and good carriers and good truckers. So all of that for Wayfair to be successful has to work on the back end too. It's not just how they do it on the front end with their customer. So Kyle, I really appreciate you kind of coming in here and bringing not only a good conversation about the role of freight technology in taking away inefficient processes, but just reminding our listeners that truck drivers are so vital to our industry. And we need to do everything we can as an industry to use the technology and the tools we have at our disposal to kind of get back to that human side of the fundamental aspect of doing business honestly, transparently, and doing it well so that we can work together and get to a better place and everyone benefits. So we'll have to have you back again soon, Kyle. I really appreciate your voice. And I want to thank you for giving your insights to the Freight Project podcast listeners.
Thanks a lot, Adam, and we'll speak soon.
All right. Take care. Thanks so much.